You talk about the RIIC now, which is Russia, India, Iran, and China. Could you talk about the importance, particularly of Iran now in BRICS, given that it appears that this threat of all-out war is now gradually accelerating toward Iran in particular?
It's fascinating because when you talk to Iranian diplomats, it's like you can feel the weight, the gravitas, and the sophistication of the old Persian Empire as well. They see diplomacy as a very, very long road in a very wide spectrum. They are not in a hurry for anything. They know that Israel is trying to provoke them into a war because the war that Israel wants is the United States against Iran, and Israel will be, just on the sidelines watching it. They want the United States to fight their war, the Talmudic, psychopathological, genocidal, Eretz Israel, eternal expansion war. They want the US to fight it. And the Iranians, well, they read history very, very well. They know that their role as the leader of the axis of resistance remains. And of course, every other member of the axis of resistance looks up to Iran. Hezbollah, the Houthis, the militia, all the militias, the Hashd al-Shabi, different layers of militias in Iraq, the Syrians, from the Syrian Arab army to exactly progressive anti-imperial outfits in Syria. And at the same time, they know that these provocations, there is a limit when a big lesson will have to be inflicted on the Israelis. And unfortunately, we're getting there very, very fast. Of course, we don't know, and nobody knows. It's pure guesswork to know what Khamenei and the leadership of the IRGC are planning, not only for the next counter strike, but for subsequent strikes. It's quite possible that this could reach a point where we're going to have something that will startle not only Israel, but the whole collective West quite soon, in the next, before the end of the year, even in a few scenarios. But that's not the most important part. The most important part is that Iran wants to concentrate in its new role as one of the top shaping powers of the new multinodal and interconnected world. So they are thinking about they don't have many illusions in terms of the Americans ever canceling those sanctions. So they are reorienting trade towards their BRICS partners, the International North-South Transportation Corridor, Central Asia, more trade with China, Turkey, exactly, the Caucasus, you name it, everything east of Istanbul. And they will have to forget about the West, of course, but that's inevitable. And that's inevitable for Russia and for Iran, which are under heavy sanctions. In terms of India and China, then it gets much more complicated. But another good point for Iran, the relations of Iran with these three other top BRICS of the Primakov quartet are absolutely first class, geoeconomically, geopolitically, and also militarily. It's not that Iran, if things derail completely in West Asia, it's not that Iran is expecting that Russia and China will be in their backs with lots of weapons. No, so it's not going to happen. And because they don't want a full-blown regional war in West Asia, which is exactly what Israel wants, and exactly what some lunatics in the US also want. So the most important takeaway in terms of Iran in what was discussed in BRICS and preparing the signing of this comprehensive strategic partnership with Russia is Iran as, let's call it Iran's a peaceful rise, but as a geopolitical power, as a geoeconomic power, and not necessarily as a military power. But if they have to demonstrate their military prowess to, let's say, facilitate their new positioning across Eurasia as a top geopolitical and geoeconomic power, no problem for them. They will go for it. And the Israelis they're not going to like it.
Talk a little bit more about that, if you could, the balancing act here, because of course Iran has to defend itself, and Iran is making very much bold moves in response to this ongoing escalation, which is historic in character. It's just interesting how we have witnessed history with the BRICS summit, and also throughout the month of October, we've witnessed maybe something incredibly historic in West Asia with regard to how dangerous the situation has become, where you have direct strikes on Iran and then direct strikes, of course, on the genocidal entity of Israel. But I wanted to ask you about Iran's balancing act here, because a lot have made this assertion that Iran is trying to ensure that it can remain a rising power and player in the multipolar world, and BRICS is a big part of this, and the focus on development and the focus on stability and sovereignty is a big part of this. How does Iran do this? It's obviously a very huge challenge.
Exactly. And I think all of us were always asking themselves, well, they have a lot of sang-froid. You know, they calm, calculating. They're never in a hurry. They look around all the possibilities in the chessboard geopolitically. They know exactly what they don't want. They do not underestimate the combined power of the US and Israel, never. They keep very clear their, let's say, their historical mission as leaders of the axis of resistance. To the axis of resistance has to succeed because it's a do or die conflict, or I prefer to call it a direct clash. Either we have the victory of genocide and Eretz Israel, or on the other side, we have the victory of the resistance, which is supported by virtually the whole planet. So it's as clear cut as that, you know. Because the summit was in Kazan, of course, very important, the symbology, because Kazan is the northwesternmost focus and point of the Islamic expansion in that area. So that was very, very clear for how many? 1.8 billion, 2 billion, maybe 2 billion Muslims around the world. The image of the mosque, of the Kula Sharif mosque, adjacent to the Kazan Kremlin, in virtually every image coming out of Kazan. And that's absolutely startling. Walking around the Kazan Kremlin and passing in front of the mosque at night, it was a magical experience. And even on a smartphone, you were, wow. So can you imagine people in the middle of Java, southern Philippine islands, or, in the Hejaz, or in the deserts of Mauritania watching that, immediate connection. Very, very, very powerful. And nobody was thinking in terms of Sunni and Shiites, because Tatarstan, Kazan is the capital of Tatarstan, is a picture of a multipolar world in the making and working, because the Muslim Tatars are 52, 53% of the population, and the other 47, 48% are Russian Orthodox Christians. And you go to Kazan, you walk into Kazan, around Kazan, and you talk to the people in Kazan, it's perfect harmony. They live in absolute perfect harmony, economic opportunities for all of them. This is multipolarity in action. And this aspect was also very important for Russia to project to the lens of Islam, because the relationship with the Russian government with the lands of Islam is getting closer and closer, irrespective of if you're Sunni, Shiite, Sufi, it doesn't matter. Very important. And this close relationship between essentially a Shiite government in Iran and a Russian government that may be secular but is strongly influenced by Orthodox Christianity. Many of the top players in the Russia Security Council and the administration, they are pious Orthodox Christians. It's very, very important. So there are points of contact in terms of the war of the West is a war against Shiism and a war against Christian Orthodox Christians as well. I had this conversation with some commanders in Donbass early this year, and they were stunned. They said, yes, in fact, these Shiite groups is more or less what we're fighting here. We're fighting for our land, our values, our religion, etc. It's the same thing that they're doing. They still call it Middle East, in West Asia. So this is extremely important. It would take, I think, still a lot of cross-cultural studies to understand how this interaction is proceeding. Why it's not only in terms of Russia feeling attacked by the West or Shiites feeling basically masterminded and in minority in relation to Sunnis. It goes way beyond that. And it gets to the level of Iran and Russia as civilization states, and civilization states that now are on a path of higher understanding, if we can put it this way, And that does not preclude good relations with Russia, with Sunni Arab and Sunni Muslim countries everywhere. Turkey, for instance, they were for Erdogan. Let's say that Erdogan sort of forgot all the enmity in the past between, for instance, the Ottomans and the Tsarists, and he basically went to Kazan to sell Turkey as a partner of BRICS and maybe a future full member. Obviously, he always is hedging as usual. He has his reasons, internal Turkish politics, trying to find a measure of balance to hedge against the Americans, telling the Americans, look, I'm going to Eurasia, I'm embracing Eurasia. Do you have anything to offer to me? Obviously, the Americans have nothing to offer to him, or the Europeans, or the European Union, exactly. So this interaction of civilization states, very powerful players, mid-ranking powers and big powers, across religious lines, cultural lines, modes of development. This was fascinating to watch him play in Kazan. And this is the most important aspect of the BRICS lab, because it not only promotes that, encourages that, and they know that the rest of the global South is paying a lot of attention. So this adds legitimacy to the, let's say, the overall BRICS master project, if we can put it this way, which is to build an alternative system of international relations practically from scratch. Extremely hard. And they know that deep down, they know that the reform from the inside by the hegemon is not going to happen. Because for the hegemon to give something and to be tolerant, the hegemon is not a benign empire, it's not a tolerant empire. It's extremely intolerant, and it's nearly totalitarian, and now more totalitarian than ever. So they will not accept to be contested by a group, even including big powers of the global South. We want to change the system of international relations. No, because as we all know, for them, it's the rules-based international order, and they control it. And they can turn it upside down anytime they want, which is where we're getting with the possible results of these two forever wars. Danny, what's going to happen in West Asia if Iran teaches a big, big lesson to Israel, and what is already happening in Ukraine, where, for all practical purposes, the collective West is finally waking up to the fact that they are losing badly and they will lose badly. So the repercussions are going to be, and connecting to this, I would like to talk to you a little bit about what I was watching this morning, which was one of the top Valdai sessions. I think it's going to be very interesting for all of you guys, because the main speaker essentially this morning at the Valdai in Sochi was Karaganov, Sergei Karaganov, which is an immensely interesting character, because not only Putin listens to him and debates him, even in public. Last year, they were debating in public in Sochi. But Karaganov, it was the first one who basically said in the open that the Russian nuclear doctrine needed some tweaking, because the other side was bent on basically destroying Russia. And among other things that Karaganov said this morning, some of these that caught my attention. He said, literally, we are living in biblical times. He talked about classic conventional imperialism of endless expansion, leading us to probably we have an opportunity to avoid World War III. You know why? It's fascinating. He described it as the world is slipping towards a global war. That was the beginning of our conversation, right, Danny? Changes of balance of power, changes in the balance of power are pushing us towards a big, big war. But then he turns the whole gloomy assessment around, that this big war could be NATO trying to do something absurd in Ukraine because they know that they will lose, or Israel trying a sort of some option completely demented in West Asia. Karaganov described the war in Ukraine as a replacement of World War III. So he sees Ukraine as, okay, we're not going to have a World War III destroying everything. NATO, the Americans and NATO tried their mini World War III in Ukraine against Russia, and they're losing. So what's going to happen after that? And then he says, then we can maybe agree on some kind of order in Eurasia, which is exactly what Putin was trying to explain to the Americans. You all remember, December 2021. Before the SMO, indivisibility of security, let's try to reorganize Europe, Eastern Europe, the post-Soviet space, all of us, everybody respecting each other, indivisibility of security, so security for everybody. And obviously, Americans totally ignored. And then came the SMO, because the Russians thought, essentially, according to their intel, faulty or not, that there was going to be a NATO supported blitzkrieg against Donbass, and there will be thousands of dead, at least. So this reasoning by Karaganov is very, very interesting, because essentially he was saying, and I'm quoting him directly, let's make the Ukrainian war the last major war of the 21st century. But now, Danny and our audience, I think we could disagree with him, because maybe the last big war of the 21st century is Israel against the axis of resistance. Because the war in Ukraine is more or less, we all know the result of the war in Ukraine. But the war of Israel, supported by the US against the axis of resistance, it's completely, we have no idea what could happen, including a nuclear element.
Right.
You see? So I think what he said this morning is food for thought for many of us in the near future, in the next few weeks and months, certainly. Because the fulcrum in terms of provoking a big war is not Ukraine anymore. The Americans are not foolish to start something gigantic in Ukraine, because they don't even know where Ukraine is on the map. but Israel against the axis of resistance, collected and supported in the background, diplomatically at least, if not a little bit more, by BRICS nations, by especially Russia and China. Wow, that's a completely different ballgame. I would say much more incandescent than Ukraine.